Kay is returned, her corpse is returned to her father, and her father says, my baby, my baby. It intercuts with the young mother who is saying, my baby, to the baby in the incubator. And there are a couple of things at play there. I wanted people to recognise that we all have a very strong will to live, and that what Sarah Kay was facing at the end of the first episode was mind-blowingly horrific. The notion that when he removes the mask, that she sort of senses that he intends to kill her. So I was trying to get the enormity of that. And also the try to, in some ways, play out the tragedy of losing a child or a sister in case of Marion, and that dramatising the idea that the very small baby who's only 21 or 22 weeks old has a will to live, strong will to live, and that the mother who's only 17, and this is what affects Sally Ann, already loves the baby from the bottom of her heart. So I was trying to say how much more painful and awful it is for Ian Kay to be looking at that site. So I was trying to convey the enormity of what Spectre does. And in the third season, again, as you will have seen, there are people dedicated to saving another human being's life. It just so happens that it's Spectre's life. But as O'Donnell says, that's our job, that's what we're here to do. But it can't be without complexity for them, and it can't be. And this is something in Northern Ireland that plays very strongly, because of course, he says that in the scene, but going back into the Troubles, you could be, as a medic, you could be treating, a member of the Shankill butchers alongside. You could be Catholic, treating a Protestant killer, or you could be, treating a police officer alongside a bomber or something like that. So they've always understood those dilemmas.
So when you started writing, did you intend it to go to the third season, and for that season to be in a hospital initially?
No, not quite. No, I mean, I originally pitched for 12 parts, and Ben Stevens has said, well, you can have 5, and I said, I can't do it in 5, and he said, well, you don't have to finish it. So that was always, sorry,
at the end of the first season. At the end of the first season, we thought, we're not going to get it.
No, some frustration, I would guess, but also it was always planned that there would be a second season. Of course, I couldn't be absolutely sure there'd be a second season, but we were recommissioned after 3 weeks or something like that. With regard to the third season, yes, I always had ideas about where that would go, and I had a very strong idea about where it would end and how it would end for the characters. But it was, by its very nature, then a medical drama, so I had to kind of get my head around the idea of directing a medical drama for the first time, which was really interesting and a challenge, but exciting to do as well.
And it is called The Fall. Will we see redemption in this third part?
I believe so. I'm not going to say too much about what characters are redeemed and what aren't, but there's always been this sense that Gibson particularly is fighting to protect and to redeem characters where she can. That becomes even more of an imperative for her, I think, as the third season unfolds. But of course, all the characters are sort of fighting for themselves as well, in the face of the horror that someone like Spectre wreaks, on his family, on his wife, on the victims, the co-victims, and so on. So I've always wanted the ramifications of Spectre's actions to radiate out and, and resonate for everybody.
It does sound as though it's going to be a little bit more optimistic. The emphasis on being saving.
He says optimistically.
I say optimistic.
Yeah, exactly.
And the idea that people are trying to save lives as well as destroy.
There are people who are trying to save lives, but I've always, I go back to what I was saying about Sally Ann, her dedication to save life. There have always been people who have been trying to save life, and that means, biggest of all, Gibson from the first moment is trying to stop him from doing what he's doing, find him, catch him, stop him from doing what he's doing, protect other people's lives. And so The Fall has always been about how far you can protect yourself against that kind of dark force that wakes it up.
I suppose this kind of leads on to the question of whether there is anything redeemable in the man you play. You must be relieved to see too much dialogue in that first. It's an incredibly eloquent tear that you shed. I'm going to end up feeling sorry for this man.
That was a tricky time, trying to get that tear right. But it was a very technical shot, get the emotion, it was very tricky.
Was it real?
It was real, actually, it was real, yes, thanks.
No. What were you thinking about?
God, we won't get into that. But yeah, it's hard to find any redeeming qualities in Spectre, but I feel that when playing him, the aspects of him that are commendable, and I'm saying that there's very few, but I do think there's an element of he shows traces of being a good father at times, particularly. No, I'm serious. I'm serious. It's specifically in the first series, I do think he shows something close to love, particularly to Olivia, his daughter. I do think that he approached his profession as a bereavement counsellor with professionalism, and we talked about this. I think he provided some good quality level of support to families who were in grief of losing someone. I mean, that's the genius of Alan's writing, is that this is someone who is very adept at taking life, and he is also relatively adept at helping people through losing someone. So they are as close to redeeming.
And he has lost someone. He's lost his mother.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and that is a big element of the way he is, of who he became.
There's this dialogue in the second season between Stella and Jim Byrne, where Byrne describes him as Spectre as a monster, and Stella says no, he's a man. He's on a continuum with other men. Do you agree with that? It sounds like you don't see him entirely as a monster.
I think it'd be wrong to play him entirely as a monster. I think he's got to have one of the reasons that makes Spectre, I think, compelling, and certainly I found him very alluring from the first moment I read the scripts in the first series 5 years ago, whatever it was, is that he is, there has to be relatable aspects to him. There's got to be aspects that other human beings can identify with to an extent, and you've got. I always felt that when I'm playing those moments with the children, I'm playing them as a father and nothing else, and there should be no undercurrent of menace or a psychopath in those moments, because they are. Why would there be? He's a father talking to his daughter. He's a father talking to his son, and his husband talking to his wife in the early parts of the first series. I always thought to play him, I don't view him totally as monstrous, because I've always wanted to avoid that tag in my interpretation of portraying him.
So how method are you in preparation for this role? Do you lock yourself in a bathroom and think I'm being salted for an hour before you go on to
I can always say, the worst thing always comes to my mind when people present the questions like that. No, I've never done that, but no, look, I mean, that whole term method is so, there's so many forms of it now. It's become this thing that this is one way to approach. But everyone, to an extent, every actor, I think, has a method of sorts, and they approach it a different way. You don't want to be too method in the layman's definition of method. I think most people think it's staying character all the time. I would never want to do for someone like Spectre. I don't think I would have a wife anymore. But I've especially 3 series in, 4.5 years in, I have ways of locking myself into his psyche quickly without having too much of build up for the most part, and that's just come over time and having an understanding of the character, I think. But no, I'm very much when I can, I jump out of his skin, because I think that's appropriate.
There was a moment when we were in season 2, we were shooting in Spectre's lair, which is a really unpleasant environment, and it was with Val, who's here tonight, and she was playing Rose Stagg, and she was doing the stuff direct to camera, the defiant, the whole range of running the gamut of emotions that she was running through, including, and she was crying, and shouting at the camera, and I was sitting by the monitor crying, watching her. Jamie was waiting to do his bit. I looked across at him. He had his head in his hands. He was so affected by what she was doing. And it came to the point where Val said, "Can I go again?" I said, "I can't actually watch you do it again. I promise you it's brilliant, but you can't do this to me again." I've written the damn stuff as well. And then Jamie did the bit where he turned the camera on himself, and he did it brilliantly, but it wasn't that he was identifying with Spectre in order to do that, quite the reverse. He was in turmoil about it and felt the horror of it as much as anyone did. But when it came to acting that moment, he completely nailed it because he's a brilliant actor. And when we played the scene to Gillian, the editor cut those tapes together, and I said I didn't want Gillian to look at the tapes before she saw them, and so the scene where she watches the tapes and cries, we just put 2 cameras on her, it's 1 take. That was Gillian's response to watching the videos. So, I'm blessed to have just brilliantly, emotionally deep and empathetic, powerful actors to play in the moment. But actors get into the moment, and in the moment, they believe it completely and utterly, and that's what they do. That's what they're so fantastic at. And actually, as a writer, if you're writing and you're not crying at a moving scene, then you're probably not getting it right in some kind of way. So I sit at the monitor and cry a lot of the time. But I figure that I should be in tears at some of the stuff I've written. But
have you cried, Gillian, during the process of this?
Of this series?
This series?
No. Yes, but I'm not going to talk about it.
Nor should we.
Yes.
I mean, that really
we learn more and more about the characters as this season goes on.
Do you fit into that character quite easily, Gibson, quite quickly now in the 3rd season? Do you find it easy to put on that outfit and become her?
Yeah, I mean, even when we're doing wardrobe fittings in Selfridges, the minute those clothes get pulled off the rack and I put them on, I can come in my combat boots and my hair in a ponytail, and I put those clothes on and they're stellar.
They're not your style. You don't have a closet at home full of silk shirts.
I'm dying to ask for that.
This show makes me so complicit in the male conspiracy.
You really want me to answer that question?
I'm interested to know the style of clothes.
What my style of clothes is?
I
wear jumpsuits. 20-inch heels. Do I I suppose I've got some silk blouses somewhere in my
It was a look that was pretty much put together by Maggie Donnelly, the costume, and Gillian. And I think it worked incredibly well. I wrote in the first scene, she's in sweatpants, Uggs, a vest, a face mask, washing the bath, desperately trying to get ready to go to Belfast. But when she turns up at Belfast airport, she's in the overcoat and she's presenting a face to the rest of the world of the professional arriving to do a professional job. So Gillian, I think, came up with costume ideas together with Maggie that sort of worked for a woman in that context. And there are other things we see, obviously her in repose and all the rest of it, but it's a look that really works, I think, for character. And she is
and there was that
Gibson,
element in this episode when somebody goes back and finds those clothes.
Yes.
It is very much part of Stella's persona.
Because she thinks she's going to be talking to the press and she wants to present herself in the right kind of way to do that. Then Burns, of course, says, "You're not."
And of course Burns finds it very provocative, the way Gibson dresses as well.
That might be you as well, Andrew. I'm not sure.
I knew it was going to be so.
Yeah. Burns
There's
is
no way out for a man watching the show.
Burns is very conflicted. Burns is very conflicted about Gibson altogether.
Yeah.
Burns, as he said in season 2, I would have left my wife, my job, my children, everything for you. And Gibson says that would have been a mistake.
Gillian, I think a lot of us would like to know at that moment when Tom Anderson asked, "Why did you go to the wounded Spectre before me in the woods?" And your character comes out with a very coherent reply. But are we to take that as at face value, or is there some kind of unhealthy fascination between Stella and the Spectre?
I don't think there's an unhealthy fascination. I think she's fascinated. She's obsessed with him, and and bringing him to justice. And the idea that he would get away with it, or that he'd get off easily by simply dying, I think is a quite difficult thing for her to grasp, but that might be a possibility that's playing out in front of her. And so, she can see that Anderson is shot in the arm and is likely to survive. I think she has been around long enough to suss that out, but she ultimately wants to save his life so that he can stand trial.
It's a bit hard.
Absolutely.
What do you think? Is that...
I mean, we've seen a slight lack of compassion towards the man.
A lack of compassion
She's
towards
quite,
a man.
she's quite tender with, I think, with him, I think.
She's very tender with Anderson. I think she's deliberately tender with him and treats him gently. And we see more of that as the third season goes on. But she absolutely makes the right decision. I mean, she has to save his life. She can't, the family has to have closure. He has to, for him to die there on the side of the road would be, beyond devastating for everybody.
It's always a learning curve as well, isn't it? For someone like Gibson, she's always trying to learn more about what makes someone like Sept tick, on the basis that it will make her a better detective, a better police officer in the future.
Well,
but
she's clearly the best police officer
in the world.
In the world. Certainly in Northern Ireland.
She makes a few mistakes.
Are any of you going to own up to that she has any flaws, you think?
She has lots of flaws.
Give me one.
Give you one. I don't
That's
think
not
it's...
actually intended. That wasn't intended.
No.
That's not even a thing, is it?
No, it's not a thing. I don't think it's necessarily a good decision for her to have slept with Anderson. I think she's made some strange, more